The deal that Trump and China sort of agreed upon, it's only for a year, so there is like that small space, like small pause that companies have, and even the US and China have to kind of figure out what they're going to do with this export controls issue with China.
Welcome to Deep Dive. This week we're unpacking the buzz around rare earths and critical minerals, terms you've heard in headlines about US-China tensions, but what do they really mean for everyday Americans? These elements power everything from your smartphone's magnets to fighter jets and electric car batteries. With China controlling about 90% of the global supply, the US is racing to break free, and the Trump administration is leading the charge with deals, investments, and policy pushes. Joining us is Maydeen Merino, the reporter who broke several key stories on this for the Washington Examiner. Well, Maydeen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dive in. For viewers new to this, can you break down what rare earth elements actually are? They're not as rare as the name suggests, but why are they so vital for things like magnets and EVs, wind turbines, or military tech? And from your reporting, how does China's 90% grip on the supply chain create vulnerabilities for the U.S.?
Yeah, so rare earths are basically a set of metals that aren't actually rare. They're just hard to refine and hard to process. They make super strong magnets, which are found in like electric vehicles, wind turbines, phones, and other like applications for defense and even medical devices. So the issue here is that China controls about 90% of the mineral refining and processing. So when they tighten that supply chain, the US and others around the world definitely feel that sort of grip on the supply chain.
I see, makes sense. And your articles highlight imports. The USGS says the US got nearly 56% of its rare earths from China between 2020 and 2023. So what everyday products in American homes or industries would grind to a halt without these minerals?
Yeah, so a lot of everyday items rely on these minerals, like blenders, hard drives, electric vehicle motors, and then also like medical and defense equipment. I figured, by talking to folks in the industry, like mineral folks, they usually tell me, what type of mineral, what their type of mineral is used for in terms of like the economy. So they'll be like, for instance, like lithium can be used in like electronics, like smartphones, laptops, smartwatches, and other tech applications. So just talking to folks in the industry, they usually tell me what their minerals are used for. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. And China's used export restrictions as leverage, like the April bans on 7 rare earth metals and also recent ones on 5 more. So how has that played out in trade talks, and what risk does it pose to U.S. national security?
Yeah, so when China restricts exports in minerals, it's companies, immediately feel that. They immediately feel those restrictions, and it has put pressure on the U.S. in trade talks as of recently. I know like some magnet makers had to slow down production after, the April export controls that were imposed by them. And also, folks in the auto industry had also felt that impact as well, just because their cars, they need those minerals to build their cars. So yeah, it definitely is like a domino effect within different industries throughout the United States and also across the globe. So
Yeah, certainly. And President Trump just struck a truce with Xi Jinping at the APEC summit, pausing some export controls for a year, but it doesn't fix earlier restrictions. So is this a win or just a Band-Aid? And you quoted experts calling it positive certainty for markets. How did you gauge investor reactions like the stock boosts for companies such as MP Materials and Energy Fuels?
yeah. I think experts, what they've told me is it is sort of like a Band-Aid solution. Like you said, it doesn't solve the previous exports restrictions that China had imposed on other rare earths. So, it gives sort of somewhat of a pause, I guess, for industry to kind of, recollect themselves and try to figure out what the game plan is while they wait for the US and China to kind of come up with some type of solution on these export restrictions. And then the deal that Trump and China sort of agreed upon, it's only for a year. So there is like that small space, like small pause that companies have, and even the US and China have to kind of figure out what they're going to do with this export controls issue with China. So yeah, so then at the time, I mean, you saw stocks like MP Materials jump just because it is a temporary solution. It kind of gives somewhat of a relief for folks in that space and other companies as well.
I see. And the administration's going bold with direct investments, a multi-billion-dollar stake in MP Materials for their Mountain Pass mine, a 5% stake in Lithium Americas, and now a $1.4 billion deal with Vulcan Elements for rare earth magnets. So what's the strategy here?
Yeah, I think, the US and the administration is sort of putting some type of skin in the game, I guess, to kind of build up homegrown supply chain. I think the idea of this is to kind of invest in US companies and kind of companies locally as well. Because some of them are also Canadian-based companies too, but they're here working in the United States. But the idea of this is kind of build the supply chain here in the United States because we don't really have that supply chain. We've relied on China so much for refining and processing these minerals. So the US really needs to build out an entire supply chain here to compete with China and to kind of reduce that reliance from China as well. So yeah, so this is just it's sort of been an unusual take that the administration has taken and sort of taking stakes in these companies. You've seen like China does this quite a bit in their country as well when it comes to like, kind of champion certain companies and making sure that they could grow. So the US is sort of taking that approach when it comes to minerals. And I think also other, uh, I guess, infrastructure and other tech-based companies as well that they believe is essential for the economy. So yeah, so it's a really unique time to see kind of the administration taking these different approaches and trying to figure out a way to build the supply chain.
Interesting. And on the international front, Trump's signing deals with Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Australia to diversify supplies. No new tariffs promised, but maintaining 19% ones. So, how do these fit into the bigger picture of unlinking from China? And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the U.S. could end reliance in 12 to 24 months. You covered his optimism. Is that realistic, given permitting timelines could take a decade?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is, not only is the United States also like taking stakes in other companies and other mineral companies, but they're also looking abroad and seeing who they could kind of team up with in terms of, helping each other to build each other's supply chains and diversify it. Like you mentioned, those Asian nations, they're now working together in terms of trying to diversify that supply chain because, it will take a while for the US supply chain to grow and to build. It takes years for that to happen. But in the meantime, they're going to other countries to, see what type of minerals they are able to process, refine, or even mine, and just figure out different ways and a different path to build up and boost the critical mineral industry here, and to reduce reliance on China. So you're seeing the US sort of take different paths and different approaches and just trying their best to reduce that reliance from China.
Yeah. So domestically, the Permitting Council is fast-tracking mining projects even during the shutdown, adding ones like the Codwell Canyon mine, and the Interior Department just expanded the critical minerals list to include copper, coal, and uranium. How are these moves accelerating production, and what pushback are you hearing from environmental groups on things like coal's inclusion?
Yeah, so Fast 41 is part of the Permitting Council, and it's essential for the permitting process. The Permitting Council works with local and state and federal agencies to just ensure that the permitting process is fast-tracked for key infrastructure projects like critical minerals and rare earths. When it comes to like coal and things like that, we have seen pushback from like environmental groups and things like that. But overall, I think the Permitting Council has done a good job in terms of what their goals are, which is to get things fast tracked and pass the permitting process. And we've definitely seen, several projects already past the finish line.
Okay, so one fun note, you've woven in vivid analogies like lawmakers waving blenders to show mineral dependencies. How do you make complex supply chains accessible, and what's the most surprising fact that you uncovered?
Yeah, in my reporting, I try to keep it as simple as possible. I try to note that, minerals are used in everyday products, like I mentioned before, smartphones, blenders, like you said. So people could kind of really understand what's at stake here, that, it will impact the everyday individuals. And I think, the most surprising thing I found is that, all these minerals and, metals, once there's some type of export control on them or some type of tariff or anything in that regards, it definitely impacts industries across the globe. It impacts industries across our economy. Like I mentioned, the auto industry definitely felt this. Even like renewable industries like wind and solar, they definitely felt certain trade outcomes when it comes to critical minerals. So yeah, I definitely try to make sure that I sort of simplify this topic because it can be kind of policy wonky. And just so my readers understand that, even though you're not being impacted directly by this, it might impact you eventually when it comes to you purchasing your smartphones, you're purchasing a laptop, or whether or not there are certain products on the market. So yeah, just try to keep it simple and, make sure my readers know that this does impact everything throughout our economy and different sectors throughout the economy.
Absolutely. I mean, that's actually a skill that I think people don't realize that you have. It's hard to break down a lot of complex information and to make it simple. So my hat's off to you for that, Maydeen. That's a roadmap to why rare earths matter, and from your EV battery to national defense. Thank you so much for the insights and for pulling back the curtain on your reporting.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for watching Deep Dive. Please visit our website for more of these stories and feel free to send us your questions or story ideas. We hope to see you back here next week.